Hello, I'm Samantha Sonavaratna. I'm a cookbook author and food stylist, and today I'm going to show you how to make my barley oat biscuits. They're crunchy and delicious. They go with sweet and savory, and they also go really well with a Manhattan cocktail, which is my absolute favorite, and I'm going to show you how to make that too. So the first thing we have to do is make our biscuit dough. That needs to chill in the fridge for about an hour before you can roll it out. Start with half a cup of pecans. I don't even toast them. You can if you'd like to, but I'm just trying to make it easy. And then a quarter cup plus 2 tablespoons, also known as 6 tablespoons of brown sugar. Light or dark is fine. So we're just trying to grind our pecans down nicely, but in order to make sure we don't have pecan butter, throw in the sugar at the same time. Although pecan butter sounds kind of good. That's almost finely ground. We have more things to add, so it'll be no problem. Now we're gonna add 1 cup of oats. These are quick cooking oats. You could use old-fashioned rolled oats, that would be fine. And to that, we add half a cup of all-purpose flour. I like to scoop and sweep my flour so that it doesn't get compacted in the measuring cup. Half a cup. And now we are adding half a cup of barley flour. Barley flour adds sort of a sweet, nutty flavor to these biscuits. Again, scoop and sweep. And into the food processor. I use kosher salt for all of my cooking, so I use it for my baking as well. Okay, that looks good. And now we need to add 10 tablespoons of unsalted butter. If you have salted butter and you want to use that, just go down on your kosher salt a little bit. No problem. And I'm just going to cut this in cold, unsalted butter. That's 8 and 10. And you do want to make sure the butter is nice and cold because that is going to lead to flaky, tender biscuits, just like you're making a pie dough. So I'm cutting this in. I want the pieces to be sort of the size of peas or a little bit smaller. You can just pulse it until you get there. That looks good. So now we're gonna add 2 tablespoons of water to our mixture, and we want just enough water so that it holds together, but not so much that the dough is too wet, because that will make tough cookies. And it's important that your water is very, very cold because cold butter needs cold water. And in order to make sure that I have nice cold water, I'm using these awesome Kraft ice cubes. This is good because when you use little ice cubes in your water, they have a tendency to melt down into teeny pieces, and those teeny pieces can get into your dough and make holes when you roll it out and bake it. So this nice big ice keeps my water super duper cold without getting any little tiny pieces of ice in my final dough. I'm gonna add 2 tablespoons. You can add a little bit more if we need to, but it's better to just go slowly and check on your dough before you add too much. That looks kind of good to me. Let's see. Yeah, look at that. It holds together nicely. Everything's still cold thanks to my ice water here. So I'm gonna stop. I'm not gonna add any more water. And now this dough needs to chill before we can roll it out. I'm just gonna knock it. And I can form it into a little rectangle using the sides of the plastic. We need to divide this into 2. So I'm gonna get a bench scraper, divide it into 2. Get this over to our second piece. She looks a little bit dry, but I think it's gonna be okay. After it rests, all the flour will hydrate properly and it'll be fine. I think it's better to add too little water than too much. Okay, so now our dough looks good. We're forming our dough into a nice, neat rectangle. I like to form my dough into this shape that I'm gonna roll it out to later, Just makes the job a little easier later. So there's one piece. Now here's the other half. And I'm just dividing it in two to make the job of rolling it out easier. I just think it's easier to work with a smaller piece of dough to make sure everything stays nice and cold while you're working with it. So now we can put these in the fridge to rest. So I have my chilled dough here. We're ready to roll it out into our biscuits. I had mine chilling for about an hour, but if you wanted to make this dough way in advance, you could put it in the freezer well wrapped for probably up to 3 months. And you could also just, make one disc of dough or roll one disc of dough and then freeze the other disc for another day. It's a pretty forgiving dough, as long as you can get it rolled out. So you know what? It's pretty dry, so I'm not gonna use a lot of flour. We need to roll this out into a 12 by 6 inch rectangle. Have a offset spatula handy so that you can sort of run it under and just make sure she's not sticking anywhere. And then you can add a little more flour as necessary. There we go. Now she's rolling out nicely. Okay, let's see where we're at. We're at 9.5 by 6. Okay, good. So I might just rotate her. The pieces of oats make the dough break apart a little bit, which just makes it a little bit trickier to roll than your average pastry dough. But you can always just mush it back together. That should do it. 12 by 6. We're gonna cut each log into 12 equal rectangles. I like to use a pizza wheel or a pastry cutter. I think it makes the job really easy, but obviously a knife would work just fine. So I'm gonna cut the whole dough in half. So we'll just do a mark at 3. And then each of these into 6. Okay, I'll move these over to a parchment-lined baking sheet. They're so cute. I would probably freeze them at this point on the tray if I wanted to save them for later. And then once they're completely frozen, you can put them into a smaller container and just bake off a few at a time whenever you would like some fresh crackers. These are ready. I'm gonna set them aside and roll out my second piece of dough. So before my biscuits go into the oven, I'm gonna give them a little brush of some heavy cream. This is just gonna help them get a little browner in the oven, give them a little bit of shine. I'm also gonna sprinkle them with a little bit of sugar, just for a little extra crunch and shine. We're sprinkling them with sugar, but they are kind of salty too, so they're the perfect salty sweet snack. Okay, and we can sprinkle them with this sugar. This is just granulated sugar. If you had turbinado, that would be fun, or sanding sugar, but just granulated will do a nice job too. Yum. So these guys go into a 375-degree oven for about 18 to 20 minutes until they're golden brown around the edges. I'm using the convection bake setting, and it automatically drops the temperature down 25 degrees. If you're using the convection bake setting in your oven at home, make sure you set your oven to 350 degrees. Okay, so these have been out of the oven for about 5 minutes. When they just come out of the oven, they're just a little bit too tender to move. So you just let them sit on the rack for 5 minutes, and then you can transfer them to a cooling rack to cool completely. So while my biscuits are cooling, I'm gonna put together my absolute favorite cocktail. This is a Manhattan. And typically they're served neat, which means without ice, but I like my Manhattans cold, 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 cold. So I serve it over ice. And I'm using the craft ice from the InstaView refrigerator because it melts a lot slower. They're nice big cubes. and my final drink won't be watery. Let's start with our vermouth. So this is sweet vermouth, and it's just a 2-to-1 ratio. 2 parts bourbon or rye and 1 part vermouth. So we'll do 1 part vermouth. I like to use rye. I think it tastes a little bit spicier, but you could just use whatever whiskey you like. 2 parts whiskey. Then we have a couple of dashes of Angostura bitters, and then a few dashes of orange bitters if you have them. It's the easiest drink ever. We'll stir that up so that it's nice and cold. Let's get a fresh cube to my glass. And I like to garnish with classic maraschino cherry, maybe 2. Maybe even stir a little bit of this cherry juice in there. Yum. That's perfect. So now I have my drink and I need a snack. So I have this perfect little party for one. I'm gonna get into it. I have been dying to put cheese on my biscuits, so I have this nice blue cheese. And I'm gonna put a raisin on there too, because I want sweet and savory and crisp and creamy all in one perfect bite. The biscuits are crisp and sweet and delightfully short because of all that nice cold butter, and that just means it's sort of crumbly, but in a good way, like the perfect shortbread. Sweet, salty, crisp. I could just hang out here all day.